Can the cameras on the $400 Realme GT stand up to the Xiaomi Mi 11's large 108 megapixel sensor? Let's find out. So I've gotten several requests to start off these camera comparisons with an actual camera as a baseline to give you an idea for what the scene actually looks like versus how the phones are representing the scene. And so the intro was shot on my Panasonic G7, so hopefully that gives you a better idea for what the scene actually looks like versus what the Realme GT and the Xiaomi Mi 11 are both showing right now. And so the Realme GT can be found for as low as $400 right now, and the Mi 11 was launched at about $700, but you can pretty much find it for about $550 to $600 US right now. So I think this would be a pretty good comparison because the Xiaomi Mi 11, I've shot a bunch of comparisons and it's done very well. It's highlighted by its 108 megapixel sensor on the rear, but what I found is that not only are the rear camera systems very good, but also the front-facing selfie shooter is also pretty good too. With the Realme GT, it's got a 64 megapixel main shooter with no OIS, and you would think that's not very good. But in my testing, the main camera is actually producing really good results, and the selfie camera actually looks pretty good too. So I think this will be a pretty good comparison now that the price gap is narrowing. I think a lot of people are interested in comparing these two and might be considering buying one of these two phones. And so if camera performance is important in your buying decision, hopefully this video helps you out because I'm going to show you a bunch of photos and videos in both good and low light conditions like I always do to help you decide which of these two camera systems might be best for you. So go ahead and check out all the photos and videos and let me know what you think. Everyone, so we're in the park testing out the video on the Realme GT and the Xiaomi Mi 11. This is at 4K 30 frames per second with the ultra wide angle cameras on each to start. So I'm just going to pan around to give you a feel for what each of these ultra wide angle cameras look like here in the afternoon. You can see the afternoon sun coming off my left, how these cameras are handling that and how much lens flare is going on there. So I'll pan around this way, you can see the blue sky as I pan down. You can see it adjust the exposure for that. And then I'll pan back up and you can see it readjust back and expose properly on both. So again, this is the ultra wide angle cameras to start out on each. And here we go with the main cameras on each of the phones here. Each of the main wide angle cameras, I'll pan around just like I did with the ultra wides and get a feel for how these main cameras look and compare here in 4K in this really nice sunny afternoon day here. You can see all the greens and the blues. Check out the color reproduction, see if you see any differences between the two cameras here. As I pan over here to the right, we'll do some zoom tests here on that post. So we'll go ahead with the Realme GT, 2 times there, and we can move into about 2 times here with the Mi 11. We can go into 5 times digital there with the Realme, and we'll move up to 5 times digital here as well on the Mi 11. So let's go to a max zoom here on the Realme GT, which is 10 times zoom there, and we'll go over to a max zoom here on the Mi 11, which is 6 times. So 10 times max digital zoom there on the Realme GT and 6 times on the Mi 11. So let's go ahead and back both of these out to their main lenses here, or I should say 1 times here on each. And let's go to 1 times on the Realme, and we'll go ahead and test autofocus here on the post. So first with the Realme GT, and a little bit slower autofocus there. I think you have to get a distance right, but it eventually kind of focuses it up. And we'll refocus away, and we'll focus here and away, and 1 more time. And let's go with the Mi 11. So there you go, pretty quick with the Mi 11, focus really fast and snappy, locks in. And 1 more time with the Realme GT just to see. So it kind of gets there. It doesn't look super focused to me, at least in the viewfinder. And away, and 1 more time. So it kind of does, just pulses in and out as far as what I'm seeing in the viewfinder. But let's go ahead and do some stabilization tests as I walk down the stairs here. Give you a feel for what these look like here as far as stabilization in 4K as I walk through this path. I'll pull up here at the end, and we'll just pan up into the trees and into this afternoon light, so you can kind of see how the image quality and everything changes with that bright sunlight there. Everyone, here's some front camera footage from the Realme GT and Xiaomi Mi 11. This is at 1080p 30 frames per second. The Mi 11 can shoot up to 1080p 60 frames, but since this whole video will be exported out at 30 frames, I want to keep everything pretty even here. But I'm starting out outdoors in some even lighting conditions like I like to start out with, so I can give you a feel for what both of these front-facing cameras look like in some optimal lighting conditions here without too much harsh light. And off the bat, you'll notice that the Mi 11 has a much tighter field of view, much more crop on it than the Realme GT. So if you like to vlog, maybe you want to fit more in the frame, the Realme GT might be better off for you here. But I'll go ahead and pan around so you can see what the image quality looks like here in the changing lighting conditions. So as I point back here to the afternoon light, you can see a lot of that gets blown out in the background, and that's going to happen with pretty much any phone. And I'll keep going around to give you a feel for what this looks like here and how the image quality changes, how the exposure changes on each. And we'll do it 1 more time going back this way. And we'll just start walking to that stabilization as well to give you a feel for how each of these front-facing cameras look like here. So let me know what you think of the Realme GT and the Mi 11 front-facing cameras. However, so in that last clip, I noticed that the Realme GT stabilization didn't look so good. And so I turned on their super steady mode here, and I'll notice that the crop is the same as the Mi 11. So I'm guessing that the stabilization on the Realme GT will probably be on par now with the Mi 11 because of this extra crop that it's giving here. So let's go ahead and just take a quick walk and test the stabilization to see how it looks now, because in that last clip it looked pretty jittery, so it should be looking a lot smoother and pretty much on par with what you're seeing with the Mi 11. Alright, so here's a low light video test, starting out with the ultra wide angle cameras on each at 4K 30 frames per second. So I'll just pan around here so you can see the difference between these two ultra wide angle cameras and what they look like here in this particular low light setting. We have some decent lighting around here, so they have every chance to look as decent as possible. Usually the ultra wide angle cameras are going to look a bit darker than the main camera in low light settings here, but these are the ultra wide angle cameras here on both phones for now. And here are the main cameras on each phone. I'll just go ahead and pan around so you get a feel for what that looks like here on each as well. You can see that kind of pulsive focus there on the Realme GT, but as you notice, this will be brighter than the ultra wide angle cameras, which is typical for most phones because the main lens are usually better. They're usually larger, letting more light. I'll pan around here so you can see what that looks like here, and evidence of that by the trees. As I always point out, you now see more definition of the trees against that dark skyline. They're pretty much faded into that skyline on the ultra wide angle camera. I'll pan this way, you can see the moon up there as well as that really bright street light. So the Mi 11 looks like it's flaring it out a little bit more than the Realme GT, at least in the viewfinder here. But let's go ahead and pan over this way, and we'll start walking to test stabilization here. And of course, that was a pretty ideal lighting condition with all those lights out there. And we'll be walking over to a much darker area so you can see what these cameras look like in a much darker setting by contrast. And so as you can see in the view, at least what I'm seeing in the viewfinder, the Mi 11 is a little bit brighter here than the Realme GT. And of course, as we round this corner here, you can see it's much darker, and definitely the Mi 11, again, at least in the viewfinder, is brightening up the scene a little bit more. Realme GT could be doing this more in post, but I'll pause here and I'll pan up into the night sky, which is decently dark. We have some light pollution, and the Realme GT is looking really dark. It's actually not as dark as it is with my own naked eye, but let's go ahead and pan over here to the left where it's a little bit more light. So it's a pretty dark alleyway with some light, so a little bit more blended kind of a lighting condition there. But there's a quick low light test here in 4K on both phones. Hey everyone, so here's a 1080p video clip. I turned on AI mode on the Realme GT, and this reminds me a lot of the OnePlus 9's Nightscape mode, which makes sense since both Realme and Oppo are under the, or Realme and OnePlus are under the Oppo umbrella, so they kind of share a lot of that in common. And so this really looks like the Nightscape feature on the OnePlus 9 on the Realme GT. It really brightens up the scene, as you can see here, a lot, almost too much artificially. But since the 4K video looks so dark, at least what I was seeing, I want to at least try this mode too. So if you want to get a little bit brighter video, if you're shooting in low light but you didn't want to turn on the flash because that tends to ruin a lot of images and video, a little bit too bright, look too unnatural, you can try to turn on this AI mode to try to get a little bit more uplift of light here in much darker situations. And so I'm just trying to compare this back to the plain 1080p mode here on the Mi 11 there. So definitely looking brighter here with this AI mode on the Realme GT. So I just want to kind of quickly demo that for you here. So here's some low light video from the Realme GT and the Xiaomi Mi 11. This is at 1080p 30 frames per second. Again, the Mi 11 can shoot up to 1080p 60 frames per second, but I'm exporting this whole video out at about 30 frames per second, so I want to keep everything consistent. And so I'm starting out in some pretty ideal light conditions here, so you can see what the front-facing camera looks like in its best possible lighting, the best possible video footage you can get in some fairly low light conditions here. And so obviously the Mi 11 has a tighter crop on it because I don't have the super steady mode on the Realme GT, which would also give it an equal crop, which means you're going to see the stabilization be a little bit more jittery on the Realme GT. But if you're stationary, you get a lot more field of view, so you can fit a lot more in the frame on the Realme GT in this mode than you can on the Mi 11, which doesn't have that option. And so you can see here I got some bright lights to the left and right of me here, as well as behind me with those street lights, and you can see how the front-facing camera is dealing with that right now. But let's go ahead and walk so you can see what I mean about the stabilization. It's going to look a lot more jittery here on the Realme GT. but again, you can fit a lot more in the frame, which I prefer. But I can also, with the Realme GT, switch over to that super steady mode to get the same crop and same stabilization as the Mi 11 if I wanted to. And I'm passing around a fountain to my right now, so we'll see how the microphones do with the sound of the fountain against the sound of my voice here. But we'll stop here and we'll pan around so you can see the really bright street lights behind me here. And surprisingly, both these phones are actually doing pretty well with those lights, not flaring them out tremendously badly here. But I just want to come back into this darker area here so you get a side-by-side comparison on what it looks like here in much darker conditions with both of these front-facing cameras here. So let me know what you thought about the Realme GT as well as the Xiaomi Mi 11 and the photos and videos that you've seen. Do you think the Realme GT at $400 is competing fairly well with the Xiaomi Mi 11 right now? After a cursory look at the photos and videos, I didn't really take a detailed look, but I think the Realme GT does a very good job and can actually put some better photos out than the Mi 11 at times. A little bit better focus if you ask me as well. As far as video, the picture quality might be kind of close, but I think the audio on the Realme GT is not quite good. For some reason, it has a kind of hollow sound to it or something like that. But otherwise, I think at $400 or $400 or so, I think Realme GT, very good value. Xiaomi Mi 11 is looking pretty good here as well. But let me know what you think in the comment section as far as which one you preferred, what you thought about each of these phones here, and we'll continue our conversation on there. As always, thanks for watching.